Well, hello viewers. Phil Cookman here, the Blue Envelope channel. So did a couple videos on the convention so far, little highlight reels. And there were just a few points that from the Friday session that I wanted to mention that couldn't quite get the point across in just a 5-second clip. So these are a couple of those points I wanted to check out.
The threat of death is a powerful weapon. Those under Satan's control use it to force people to betray their friends or to give up their convictions.
So this was a talk that Gerrit Loesch of the governing body gave, and towards the end of his talk, he talked about the resurrection. And so he mentions that this threat of death is a powerful weapon that Satan has, and so he goes on to say, how awesome is it that we have the resurrection hope? So it kind of neuters that whole threat that it doesn't matter for Jehovah's Witnesses. But as he was talking, what kind of came to my mind was that, yes, the threat of death is a pretty powerful weapon, and it's one that Jehovah's Witnesses can use sort of against their members to keep them in the organization. And the threat of dying at Armageddon and being separated from your everybody you know and love, if you don't keep to the straight and narrow. So I thought that was kind of interesting that actually I agree, yes, the threat of death is a powerful weapon, and Jehovah's Witnesses, as in their theology, use that quite well to, as he said, force people to betray their friends, so to hew to the line of shunning folks that are disfellowshipped or disassociated. And that threat can cause people to give up their convictions. So maybe they disagree with shunning or with the blood teaching or any number of things. So they want to get involved with social activism of some sort or run for office or whatever. But that threat of what'll happen if you get executed at Armageddon is so strong for a lot of folks that it keeps them in the organization even when otherwise they would probably leave.
Remember that death is temporary and that the life Jehovah offers each of us will last forever.
I thought this was just a kind of a creepy statement that Gerrit Loesch makes here, that just very cheerfully saying, hey, death is temporary, don't worry about it. It sort of gave me kind of Teal Swan vibes, another cult leader, for lack of a better word. And she teaches that suicide is just a reset button that you can use if you feel like there's nothing else to get out of this life. You just die by suicide, and then you start over and get on to the next thing. And I just feel like it's the cavalierness that Gerrit Loesch or Teal Swan talks about death and how it's really just a temporary thing, it's nothing to worry about, is pretty irresponsible when you're a thought leader, when you have so much power over your followers and what they think and do.
It pleases Jehovah when family members work together as a team. That promotes peace in the family. And our God is a God of peace.
So this was a talk that David Splane gave on Friday, and so the talk is about families and working together as a team. And well, the talk definitely works on that level of families in the congregation with little kids and how to train them well. I quickly began to get the vibe that I don't think this talk is just about families. I think he is giving some really specific admonishment to Bethelites, to the Bethel family. We know that the organization considers Bethelites to be a family. This is a typical article from the April 22nd, 1989 Awake magazine on page 23. The article is More Living Space for a Growing Family. And it starts out by saying, this magazine, Awake, and its companion, The Watchtower, are a family production. They're produced by what is called the Bethel family, Bethel meaning house of God. And, you'll hear from folks that worked at Bethel that sometimes if there was like a widely known judicial matter in the Bethel family, usually a sex thing that happened, and people were expelled from Bethel, disfellowshipped, that at times they would make an announcement to the Bethel family during morning worship that the matter had been handled and so is no longer at Bethel. And typically Bethelites are encouraged to keep it in the family, to not mention these matters to non-Bethelites outside of the branch office. So that's kind of the situation, that Bethel is considered to be a close family. And we know that Bethelites have had a really stressful last couple of years with the COVID lockdowns, being confined to their various compounds and branch offices. There's not always a ton of perks for being at Bethel, but one that did happen to exist was that you could travel internationally for really cheap. I don't know if this is still a thing, but in the past, talking to Bethelites, what you could do is you could buy a plane ticket and then have a shipping company. They would take all your luggage space to use it for cargo and basically pay for your plane ticket. And so you could essentially fly for free with just a carry-on. And then you get to whatever country you're going to and you stay at the branch office there at the Bethel facility. And so you have your free meals, your free lodging, travel is free. And so a lot of Bethelites really took advantage of that just to kind of travel the world and get some breathing space. And that's something that Bethelites haven't been able to do the past 2 years. They've just been stuck there 24/7. So we see that basically David Splane, there's some issues that he is concerning him about Bethelites, and he wants to address those.
If you're assigned to clean the restrooms, don't complain about it. Verify an example. Your children will learn that when there's work to be done, we just do it. We aren't picky about what we will and will not do. And we don't feel that some jobs are beneath us. Now, this is in line with Paul's counsel, found at Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4.
Now, this resonated with me because when I was in my late teens, early 20s, kind of considering whether to go to Bethel, you'd hear from time to time in the kingdom ministry or from letters that Bethel had need of certain skills or trades, and if you had those skills, to apply to help out at Bethel. And I'm sure many other young folks in the organization kind of got the idea that, I would like to kind of go to Bethel, but I don't want to scrub floors all the time. So maybe what I could do is go to college for a year or two, learn some kind of white collar trade or skill, and then apply to Bethel and go do that. And it's kind of a win-win situation, kind of game the system a little bit. And I'm sure that a lot of Bethelites have done that over the years. So you've got all these skilled Bethelites applying, but a lot of the jobs at Bethel are just kind of menial labor, scrubbing the floors and the bathrooms and landscaping and that kind of thing. And so you kind of get the vibe from David Splane here that maybe the supply of Bethelites willing to do that is getting a little low at the moment. That's one thing at my work. You're constantly hearing grumbling about, these Gen Z employees, they don't put up with crappy working conditions. They just quit and go on to some better situation. And so maybe I kind of get the vibe that there might be a kind of a similar situation going on at headquarters.
When there's work to be done, someone has to do it. Do I think that I'm so special that someone else has to look after it?
Listening to his talk, a lot of his scenarios are super specific. And so I just have to kind of wonder, well, when is the last time that you cleaned one of the bathrooms at Bethel? Just for our information.
When some in the world lose their job, they remain unemployed for a long time. They can't pay the bills. Yet there are job opportunities all around them. But they consider those jobs beneath them. And what's one of the most annoying traits an employee can have? Ask any boss. When the worker is asked to do something, he replies, "That's not my job." Teach your child that anything that needs to be done is his job if he's old enough and capable of doing it.
Again, another really specific scenario here, which makes me wonder, did a Bethelite say this to David Splane one day? That's not my job. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that you have at Bethel that I don't think I've really talked about before, that the work you're doing, the secular work essentially, and your spirituality, your status in that way, are really tightly intertwined. And so, if you went to law school and you're hired at Bethel as an attorney and you're doing great work as an attorney, that doesn't mean that Bethel can't reassign you to clean bathrooms if they want to discipline you for some sort of spiritual transgression they feel you've committed. They have that authority over you. It reminds me a lot of students, Mormon LDS students going to their university, Brigham Young University, and they have to do their academic things that any other college student has to do, but they also have to maintain their spiritual qualifications to keep going to school there. They have to do that every year, go interview with a bishop who doesn't work at the college necessarily, but he's obviously feeding back information to the college. And that bishop, if he feels like you're not measuring up to everything, has the power to get students expelled or to hold up their graduation. So even if academically they're excelling, that is a huge power that they have over you. And Bethel is kind of the same way. They sort of have Bethelites over a barrel with how much power they can bring to bear on them to really make their life miserable if they want to or feel you need it. And it's really interesting when you compare what David Splane is saying in this talk here to another talk he gave recently at the Gilead graduation. Again, talking a little bit about how some Bethelites might be getting a little too big for their britches.
A chosen vessel. How about that? How did Paul react? Did he let that go to his head? Did he immediately go up to Jerusalem and volunteer to be on the governing body, saying, well, now that I'm anointed, I can be on the governing body? No, he stayed where he was in Damascus, and he kept preaching the good news.
So again, we've got some more not so veiled counsel to Bethelites who have made the pretty obvious connection that, you can't make it to the top of the organization unless you're anointed. And so you've got these young guys that are evidently deciding, hey, you know what? I suddenly realized I'm anointed. Okay, let's be a governing body helper now. Let's hit the governing body. And David Splane saying, whoa, slow your roll, brother. Know your place. Do what you're told. Keep your head down.
Now, in 36 CE, he did go up to world headquarters in Jerusalem. And how did he react? Did he say, here I am, the chosen vessel. I'm here to help you run the place. He stayed with the Apostle Peter for a couple of weeks. Apparently, Peter had moved to Jerusalem. But he kept preaching. He just put his head to the ground and he kept preaching the good news.
So just a really interesting glimpse at kind of the HR problems going on at headquarters, evidently.
We want to encourage you in these last minutes to safeguard the peace that Jesus has given you.
Now, this was a talk that Anthony Morris gave at the end of Friday, and it's an interesting talk because he mentions Jesus a lot in this talk that immediately jumped out at me. And if you are or were one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that's pretty unusual for Jehovah's Witnesses to talk much about Jesus. In their minds, Jesus is almost kind of like, I don't know, maybe a really good circuit overseer. He's just a first-rate Jehovah's Witness, but he's definitely not in that elevated role that most denominations of the religion named after him, Christianity, the role that they put Jesus in.
And the peace that Jesus gives us, it's this inner calm. Once you know the truth and Jesus gives us the peace, we have this confidence that he loves us, Jehovah loves us, that we enjoy a good, peaceful relationship with them and a good conscience. Again, we go to the example of our Lord and Master Jesus. You see, the other one is unscriptural divorce. It often leads to immoral conduct. It certainly leads to a troubled conscience, emotional damage, and, of course, a loss of privileges.
Okay, now this clip is totally unrelated to the Jesus theme, but I did want to throw it in here just because I thought it was really interesting. He's talking about the horrible consequences of unscriptural divorce, and he talks about immoral conduct, troubled conscience, emotional damage, and of course, the loss of privileges. Oh, the humanity. I just thought it was so interesting that he equates the loss of privileges in the congregation with all those other things. It just goes to show how important status is in the organization, even if they don't like to talk about it. Now, witnesses haven't got to the point of wearing fancy dress uniforms with medals like the Salvation Army does or Scientology does. But even without that, rank is really, really important for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's kind of interesting in the Elder's Manual, the Shepherd Book, that you cannot be reproved or disfellowshipped for communication with an immediate family member who has gotten disfellowshipped. But you can lose all your privileges. So there's no danger of being kicked out of the organization, but you can lose that. And so I think it's true that for many fathers who are elders, that possibility of losing those imaginary internet points.
And welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, the show where everything's made up and the points don't matter.
Is a really powerful incentive to toe the line and essentially disown their children so they don't lose their status in the congregation.
Jesus is the truth. We can trust all of his promises. He is the truth. He's going to give us peace, already has, and to a greater extent in the future. Yes, our Master is the truth. So, brothers, please, safeguard the gift of peace that Jesus has given you.
So, I'm always on the lookout for any signs that Anthony Morris might be defecting. And so this super Jesus-heavy talk was really noticeable to me. And so I actually counted the references, and he did mention Jesus 33 times in this talk, which is a ton. But by the end of it, he had mentioned Jehovah 25 times. So, and random trivia, he mentioned Satan 16 times. Kind of reminds me of that social media exchange where somebody points out that Satanists don't believe in a literal Satan, and the other person says, well, what do you call people who believe in a literal Satan? You call them Christians. So I guess in the end, there's no need to raise the Anthony Morris alert level just yet, but we remain ever watchful, ever vigilant.
Remember, son, be ever vigilant. Be always alert.
All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much everything I've got on Friday, and we'll have to start checking out Saturday here, see what goodies there are. Hey, subscribe if you'd like to, and take care. We'll catch you on the next one.